Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to another review. And this review is going to be on Won't You Be My Neighbor? And this is a documentary on the life and legacy of Fred Rogers, aka Mr. Rogers. And this documentary came out last year, back in June, which was the official release date. But it came out in January for the Sundance Film Festival. For that year, and none of the theaters by me were showing the documentary. I think it was only in like select theaters, and so HBO aired it tonight, and I gave it a watch. And this is a great documentary. This is one of the best documentaries I've seen, in my opinion. And it was just a really well done documentary on the life and legacy of Fred Rogers, where it showed that it was told that he wanted to become a minister, but there was a little thing at that time that was brand new, and it was television. And so it was said that he wanted to put being a minister on hold, and he wanted to basically get into television. And it also showed archival footage and recordings of Fred Rogers, of Mr. Rogers himself, just speaking. It showed archival footage of him interacting with kids, archival footage of behind the scenes of when he was doing Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And they got to sit down with his widow, his wife, and his son, his two sons, his sister. And they also brought in three people from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The one who played the handyman, I think his name is Joe Nigri. David Newell, who played, of course, Mr. McFeely, and Francois Clemens, who was the police officer in like the early episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And the way the way the documentary, how they did it was really good. And it also showed, they also talked about where they wanted Fred Rogers to come to a station, a PBS station. It was WGBH, which is a PBS station in Boston. And so they invited him to come down, and it showed in footage of people all lined up, and they said, I think it wrapped around the building, and it was just seeing him there and seeing the kids and him interacting with the kids. There was footage of he was sitting down with a kid, and he had I think it was Daniel Tiger, and he was interacting with this kid, and this kid was talking about how his cat passed away. So it was a really touching piece of footage of that. And it showed early footage of when Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood got started, which was back in 1968. So there's footage of that, and then there's just footage of through the years of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and how through those years of how like the big things were going on in the world. But it was a really great documentary. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen. And I grew up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I loved the show as a kid, and even when I was like in middle school or high school, I still watched the show, because the show sort of has like that, you're never too old to watch this show. You know, you could be at any age, whether you're a kid or an adult. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood still, still like, still sticks with you, and all like the lessons that he taught us. It resonates with you, even to this day. It was a show for all ages. And I'm really glad that I grew up watching the show. Even when I had like my bad days, if I had like a bad day at school, and I come home, put on the TV, and if Mr. Rogers was on, his show, just by watching his show, made me feel a whole lot better about myself, because of the lessons that he taught us. And it's really a shame that PBS stations, and I want this, this has been in my head, and I wanted to get this out, because to me this is true. What I'm about to say is, it really is a shame that PBS stations are not rerunning Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, because I think kids nowadays should watch the show, and there should be reruns of it, because I think kids nowadays in this generation will love the show and appreciate the lessons that Mr. Rogers taught us. He taught us, and I think in like a week's episode, he taught us about like work. There was one show where it was a whole week where I think it was like one show where he ended up talking about death. And I've seen like clips of like when he talked about where he wanted to explain about death, and it was done. It was explained by him really well. And it was a thing at the time where should they talk about this to kids? Should kids learn about it? But I know there's a DVD out of Mr. Rogers episodes, which I do hopefully want to pick up at some point. But so Won't You Be My Neighbor? Great documentary. If you grew up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, this is a documentary that you all should go and see and should watch. And they also showed, I forgot to mention, they also showed the archival footage of when where he went to the United States Senate subcommittee on communications in 1969, and his goal was to support the funding for PBS and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It was in response to, because at the time there was going to be budget cuts, and so Fred Rogers had a testimony, and he spoke of the social and emotional education that public television provided, and he also talked about how his show helped encourage children to become happy and productive citizens. And the chairman of the subcommittee, his name was John O. Pastor. He didn't know who Fred Rogers was, and he didn't see like his show or his work. And Fred Rogers recited the lyrics to one of his songs, and he read it to the chairman. And after he was done reciting those lyrics to the song, the chairman was like, I think it's wonderful. And it was reported that he gave the whole testimony. He reported that the testimony had, given him goosebumps. And so right from there, the chairman gave Fred Rogers $20 million. And in 1971, it increased the funding from which was $9 million to $22 million. And search it up here on YouTube. It's the whole thing where he went to the Senate is here on YouTube, and it's a wonderful piece of footage that that he went to the Senate and gave gave the testimony. So Won't You Be My Neighbor? Like I said, great documentary. One of the best documentaries I've seen. And if you enjoyed Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and grew up with the show, this is a documentary that you have to watch. It's a great documentary, and it's been nominated and won awards so far. And also, forgot to say, they also sat down with Yo-Yo Ma, who was a cellist, and he appeared on an episode of Mr. Rogers. But there was also another special that came out, which was called Mr. Rogers. I think it's called like that, but it aired last year on PBS. It came out before this documentary, and from what I hear now, there's going to be another film, and there's going to be a film, and then Tom Hanks is going to play Fred Rogers. And I saw the picture of that. He looks a lot like Mr. Rogers. So, but the special was called Mr. Rogers, It's You I Like, and it aired on PBS last year, which that special was really good. So, but yeah, definitely check out Won't You Be My Neighbor. Great documentary. So, yes, anyways, that's it for this review of Won't You Be My Neighbor. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. And definitely give this video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. And until the next video, I'll see you all later.